Good evening. My name is Patrick Malayter, and I am a licensed CPA. Welcome to Tax Time. I want to tell you a story about our country. You know, a little over 20 years ago, when President Clinton left office, our country was riding high. The world was at peace, people seemed to get along, and our nation was in the midst of generating its fourth consecutive budget surplus. In fact, the head of our Federal Reserve at the time said we'd be able to pay off all of our national debt by 2006. And then he said we would be able to start pre-funding Social Security to the tune of $500 billion a year. Well, that didn't happen, did it? So what did happen? Well, over the last couple of decades, we've lost our way as a nation fiscally. First, under the George W. Bush administration, he passed immediately two massive tax cuts that largely benefited our highest income citizens. Then, our wars in Afghanistan and Iraq added trillions more in debt. President Obama threw in some social spending. And then COVID, the blowout spending associated with that was the icing on the cake. It left us $34 trillion in the hole. And that is why so many of you are struggling with inflation. It's cause of an effect. Effect is the inflation. The cause was we blew away the value of our US dollar with all this spending. Now, certainly, all the presidents have had a role in this mess, but the real culprit is our Congress because they determine how it is that we spend our money. We have to send them packing. We must term limit the Congress. Now, it's been said that without a vision, the people have no guidance, no ability to go ahead and move forward. In my campaign, I have a specific vision on how to attack some of our biggest problems involving the budget, inflation, public safety, and the border. But none of this is going to be able to come into being without congressional term limits, without us going ahead and ending the tribalism really on both sides of the aisle with respect to their constant inability to solve a problem. So that is why I'm running, to help our younger generation, specifically that we are going to overload with this debt, but also to help deal with the inflation that all Americans are suffering with right now. Thank you so much for your time. Competence, honesty, and I interpret it as focus on the people. Is that close?
Yep.
So competence-wise, just background, I didn't really talk much about myself in the opening. I went to Indiana University, graduated with a accounting degree with distinction, ended up starting out with one of the big four accounting firms in the country, where I became an equity partner at age 33, and then later ran one of the country's largest tax practices in the United States, the seventh largest. I understand our economy and tax system in a very, very deep way, and if I had a couple of beers tonight, I would probably forget more about the tax system than everyone in Congress combined. So my understanding of economic principles and why we got ourselves in the ditch here economically and with inflation is hard to match. With respect to honesty, the accounting profession, a lot of people don't know this, but the bedrock of it is integrity. So for example, this time of year, I would sign my name dozens of times each day that under the penalties of perjury, I certify that this information is correct and so forth. We would fire people that would lie about things within our organization. So integrity is truly a key issue. With respect to the focus on the people, I have a grassroots campaign and I spend lots of time every week talking to people like you. And it has cleansed my soul as an individual. It's given me perspective of how many individuals live here in our district. And it's given me a tremendous amount of empathy. So it's been a great personal experience for me interacting with folks like yourself. Thank you so much. Hello again. Obviously, a preacher has the right to say whatever they want to say, regardless of them being behind the pulpit or in public. We've obviously had a huge limitation being placed on First Amendment rights here over the last couple of years. I just finished reading Elon Musk's book, his biography, great book. But what happened when he took over Twitter, he soon discovered when they released the so-called Twitter files that there was a huge amount of collaboration between the federal government and Twitter to essentially cancel the free speech rights of so many people, including religious leaders, medical experts, and others throughout the country. So I try to attack a lot of these problems through my campaign planks, and one of the issues I have is a legal reform that allows individuals to sue the social media companies for instances where the government has collaborated with them to shut down free speech with massive social penalties. So that's how I try to go ahead and attack issues that affect not only preachers, but people from all other walks of life that don't necessarily toe the government line. Thank you. Many people don't know that my preferred pronouns are stud muffin and hot pants. But beyond that, a lot of people don't know I grew up in downtown Gary, Indiana, back when it was the murder capital of the world. So I lived in the hood growing up there. So some of my first jobs were I was a newspaper boy for the Gary Post-Tribune. At age 14, I became a janitor. I had that job for 4 years. My wife loves it because I can clean house like a champion. And then in college, I actually had a couple jobs in the steel mill, so I was a welder. They didn't train you all that well. They said, hey, do this. And then I poured steel in the steel foundries in South Chicago. So the good thing about, when you're pouring steel, sometimes it spits and lands on your skin, but it doesn't hurt because you have third-degree burns. It burns away all the nerves. So since then, I've developed a lot of hobbies. I've retired from the accounting profession. One of my big things is I cook now 6, sometimes 7 days a week, and my wife loves that as well. Thank you. Thank you. Unlike anyone in this campaign, my key congressional plank is term limiting Congress for an 8-year time frame. So some have mentioned the so-called term limits pledge. It's ineffective as making the Boy Scout pledge in that it's meaningless. It's by an organization that's really not very serious about bringing about term limiting the Congress. Furthermore, a lot of people don't realize that Congress cannot term limit themselves. It would be unconstitutional. The only way you can do that is via an amendment that the Convention of States actually sponsors, and I am part of their organization now. So those are a handful of things. The reason that I am so passionate about this, and I believe we can absolutely get it done, is because 80% of people, 89% of Republicans, 76.5% of Democrats, and about 83% of independents want to get this done. That's why we need to do it. We have to break up this tribalism that we have in both parties right now. Thank you so much. Well, obviously we need to provide federal assistance to our veterans. We have at least a couple here on stage, and I applaud them for their service. Certainly there are also other organizations outside of the government. So for example, my wife and I are supporters of Tunnel to Towers that provide housing assistance and other assistance for our wounded veterans. But getting specifically to the border, it has 4 primary problems. One is it costs, if you pay taxes out there, it costs you about $1,000 a year. Secondly, the fentanyl issue is a huge issue. Hamilton County does a really nice job keeping records of overdoses. In my county where I live, Hamilton County, we've had roughly 350 overdose situations where somebody would have died if somebody didn't intervene, 25 actual deaths. But it's also a class discriminatory and racist policy in that what we're doing is taking away resources locally that we would otherwise have for homeless veterans and so forth and giving them to these migrants. So it's a huge issue in that respect. So those are my thoughts in that particular area. Thank you. About that. You know, every week I spend time with hundreds of Hoosiers like yourself that are so frustrated with our Congress and their ability to solve problems. And from my perspective, we just don't need to put up with this anymore. You know, that's right. We don't need to put up with millions of illegal immigrants crossing our border each year. And we don't need to put up with an economy where so many people struggle with buying groceries every week. And we absolutely don't need to put up with people in Congress spending 10, 20, 30, or 40 years enriching themselves. So I have an audience participation question for all of you to engage in. How many of you would just be excited as can be if this is the last time Nancy Pelosi, AOC, and all the other ineffective members of Congress could run? Say aye. This is why you need to vote for me. To help term limit the Congress. Because again, it's something over 80% of us agree on, because we're all smart enough to know that nothing changes where nothing changes. That's right. So you can read all about me at patrickmforcongress.com. I have my materials out there, but I also wrote a book several years ago that deals with things like psychology, linguistics, how to go ahead and solve problems and so forth, because that's one of my skills, creatively solving problems. How can the church pray for me? Just so that my health can stay up and so forth. This is a very grueling process to go through. People evaluate you, they criticize you. My older brother just passed away on Sunday. He had Parkinson's for years. So pray for my health and pray for his soul. Thank you.